All right, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. Julia here from Inspira Advantage. We're a college admissions company dedicated to helping deserving students get into the medical school of their dreams. Really excited to have this webinar for you all today, all about navigating residency interviews with confidence. Super excited. We have two really awesome panelists joining us today that will further drive that conversation. I'm just going to go ahead and get started on the agenda. So what we'll be talking about today. So we'll have introductions. So our panelists will introduce themselves, and then we'll touch on the overview of residency interviews and then what to expect on interview day on slide 3. Then we'll go over common residency interview questions, so you're best prepared. And then that'll segue really nicely into our next topic, which is how to prepare for residency interviews. And then we'll go into our Q&A. So with that being said, I ask that if you have a question throughout this presentation, we ask that you hold on to that until the designated Q&A session. That way you can answer your question or type your question in the chat box, and one of our panelists will be happy to answer that question for you. Another housekeeping item I want to add is that this presentation will be sent out to all attendees the following day, so tomorrow. So if you want to go back, if you missed something, you'll be able to access it. It'll be emailed to you tomorrow. Okay, so with that being said, let's go ahead and get our panelists to introduce themselves. Andrea, if you want to start with you first.
Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
We're good.
Okay, great. Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. I'm Andjela. I'm one of the PGY3 dermatology residents here at NYU in Manhattan. Briefly did my intern year in Florida and in Orlando, and then my medical school at University of Miami. Happy to help. This is one of my favorite preparation, aspects of preparation for residency. So without further ado, I'll just turn it over to my colleague.
Hey guys, I'm Michael. I'm currently a second-year rheumatology fellow here at Rush in Chicago. I did med school at Northwestern, residency at University of Illinois, Chicago. And, during residency, I had an opportunity to be part of, this process on the other side. So happy that you guys are here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. All right, let's get started. Let's get an overview of residency interviews.
I can get us started here. Basically, I'm sure you guys already know this, but interviews are going to be super important. Once you get interviews, basically, you already know that the program is very interested in you, but to seal the deal, this is one of the main aspects. This is an opportunity not just for you to shine, but also for the residency program to demonstrate why they would be a good fit for you. So it goes both ways.
Just an overview of the interview process. So obviously you submit your applications, and then after a certain date, the programs have access to all the interviews. And depending on the specialty you're applying to, those invites can be rolling, or sometimes they wait after a certain date to release them. So that'll be really dependent on your specialty. But I think it's important to know, at least when I applied for internal medicine residency, the invites were rolling. So sometimes if you don't reply to that interview scheduling email fast, spots might run out. I know that's technically illegal now according to ACGME rules, but I have heard some other residents or med students still experiencing that there are more invites than slots available when they're sent out. So I would advise you guys to have a separate email for interview invites. And, if you have the luxury of a smartwatch or something that can alert you to emails from that particular email, during the interview season, I think that would be really helpful to make sure that you get your interview slot. And then regarding types of interviews, I think nowadays most of them are virtual. There are some, I know in fellowship, there are some programs that are doing in-person invites. For example, my fellowship did, in-person for local applicants. But I think for the most part, the vast majority of residency interviews are virtual, unless, I don't know if Andjela, you've had other experiences in derm.
Most of them are still virtual for us, but I think it's program dependent. I know for some derm fellowships, they're actually in person. So I guess depends on the specialty at this point.
Mhm. Okay, next slide.
Guess we're going to delve into what to expect on interview day. So basically, you should, for all of your interviews, expect to dedicate that day to the interview day. This is again going to depend a little bit on the program. Some programs have shorter days, some programs have longer days. But once you're committing, that just plan that day is dedicated to the interview. You'll basically have an opportunity to engage with faculty, staff, and residents. So usually there's depending on the program, there's going to be several rooms that either have a combination of staff and attendings or just attendings or residents. And then there's usually an opportunity for informal session for questions with residents or fellows at that program. And basically is a Q&A session and usually a little bit more laid back in a group where you guys will have the opportunity to ask questions and just interact and get to know the residents a little bit better. Sometimes there's a dinner beforehand, and they usually will email you that information. A lot of times, if it's virtual, they'll send you like a credit on Uber or one of the Postmates or one of the other apps where you can actually deliver food, and you guys will then meet up the night before and have a session of just chatting with each other, maybe having like icebreaker or team building exercises. And again, typically those dinners and informal sessions are about an hour. And then in terms of the interviews, I've had anything between, a 12-minute interview or an 8-minute interview to like a 20 to 30-minute interview. So it's just going to depend on the program. They're usually pretty transparent and they'll send you an agenda the day before so you can actually prepare ahead of time. Next slide, please.
Perfect.
Okay,
Let's
so-
touch on common residency interview questions.
Okay, so I think the most common interview question is a variation of this one. Can you describe yourself? Tell me about yourself. I think that's a really important question, at least to have an idea of how you want to answer it. So definitely practice at least that question beforehand and have like a good outline for your talking points. And kind of the highlights of, why medicine, why the specialty you're picking, and why you're interested in this particular, program. I guess we can go alternate, Andjela, on these questions. Since it's a long slide.
Yeah, no, of course. Which ones did you discuss? I'm sorry, what was
Just
the
the
last
first,
one?
just the
The
first
first one, yeah. So who's your mentor or model? Sure, they're going to ask you about that just to kind of see how you can reflect upon who do you emulate and why. So it's always good to have a good example. This could be, it could be a family member or it could be a person that, you worked with in the past. Usually, because it's a job interview, I kind of lean more towards discussing or a physician or someone you've worked with and why, and giving an example why. But if you already talked about a lot about like your professional stuff, maybe this is a good opportunity to say something more personal. And I remember, we can go into that in more details if you guys have questions, but I remember mentioning my grandma, who's just had a very significant impact on my life. I'll pass it on to
So
for
next,
question
what are
3.
your hobbies and interests? So I think, at this stage in your training, you've shown that, you can get through medical school, you can get through the medicine. So they just really want to know you more as a person, kind of see that you're a well-rounded individual with, specific interests and not just hyper-focused on medicine. While that's good to some degree, as a physician, you'll be interacting with patients and they just want to see, you as a real person.
Great. And then have you been in any leadership roles? Obviously very important. And I'm sure as a fellow, even more than as a resident, but you'll have a lot of leadership opportunities as as you move and progress through your career, either as a chief resident or just a senior resident or a fellow. And you will be asked to, lead a team, lead by an example, organize things, supervise your junior residents and medical students, teach and stuff like that. So I think, given that that's going to be one of your roles, that just want to make sure you've had a leadership position in the past and you've had some challenges in communicating with teams and showing the most important things as or skills as a leader. And, some of those we can discuss, but it's usually communication. I like to say leading by example, transparency, stuff like that.
And the next question, why did you choose to attend med school? And I think, as a bigger question, why this particular specialty, whatever specialty you're choosing? I think it's very important to have, like I said, for the previous question one for tell me about yourself, I think it's important to have kind of an outline of this question. You don't want to be long-winded. You want to have a compelling story for why you're applying for the specialty that you're applying for. So I think this is another one to really focus on and really highlight your strengths and kind of the common theme throughout your application.
Great. And then what are your unique strengths? This is basically your selling point. They have a couple of ways of asking this. What are your strengths? How would your friends describe you? Why should we take you? Those are all similar ways of asking the same question. I would prepare at least 5, and you don't have to say all 5 because, you'll probably get to say 2 or 3 to keep everything concise and humble. But I think it's a good way of just practicing because you'll get maybe a question at the end. It was like, why should we take you? And that's a permutation of the same question. And you just want to know, you want to be able to communicate well, why are you better than, someone else next to you? Why really should they take you? And so thinking about, so at least 4 to 5 strengths and having a good example, specific example is always the way to go with these. We can discuss some of these more in detail, but what are some of the strengths they look for in residency? It's usually being hardworking, and this comes and is a repetitive thing that we hear. But as long as you have a pretty unique example, that can still come off as unique. I would say, a team player, very important in residency. So if you have an example of that, say you're a team player and bring that up, I think that's going to be really great. Everyone always likes someone who's positive and brings good energy and vibes to work. So I think that's another one, and have an example for that. Resiliency, we can go on. And obviously, if you guys have more questions, we can go into this further, but I would frame this as prepare with 4 to 5 good strengths. If there's something I didn't say, it's more unique to you, absolutely go for it and just have a specific example.
Okay, next question, why does this particular residency program interest you? So this is, it's really important you do your homework before the interview to really highlight some of the unique points about that particular program. If you look at their website, if you look at the faculty, you may notice that a certain program is stronger in some clinical areas and that they really take pride in that. So if that particular area is of interest to you, it would, be to your advantage for you to kind of upsell that when you do talk to the program. And, as much as it is an interview, they want to make sure that you're a good fit and that the resources that they have would, be of use to whoever they take. So, doing research on the program and also on the people that you'll be interviewing with. So Andjela said that they typically give you an itinerary for the day. So it's very important to research the people you'll be interviewing with and seeing their clinical interests, research interests, and seeing if those kind of align with your interests. And, you can kind of weave that into how that particular program is a good fit for you.
Great. I completely agree. Where do you see yourself in 5 years is also a good question. This is going to depend on the residency program you're going into, but generally speaking, they want to know, let's say you're applying into, derm is the easiest to talk about, but for me, obviously, if you're like planning to stay in academia versus private practice, that's something they probably want to know. If you are going into internal medicine or pediatrics, they'd probably like to know is like, are you seeing yourself in this hospital, or would you want to be in like a small community hospital? Do you see yourself doing a fellowship later on? What kind of areas are you interested in? Stuff like that. A lot of times we get questions of like, how honest should we be about this, because we're technically, we are doing internal medicine, for example, but I really don't care about internal medicine. I want to do cardiology, or like I want to do GI, stuff like that, rheumatology. I obviously, it just depends how you say it. Honesty goes a really long way, I think, and transparency. I think it's always good to be transparent and honest, but it's always also good to be open to learning everything. So if you are that person who is going into internal medicine, but you want to do, let's say, rheumatology moving forward, I think a safe answer that's also honest would be, I just really want to be the best resident and attending that I could be, and learn everything possible in residency, and soak everything in. But I'm also interested in rheumatology, and so I'm going to be taking extra time to explore that as a field, but we'll see where the residency takes me. So I think, just those are kind of the things to focus on. It was like, do you want to be in a smaller area treating, patients in a rural area, or do you want to be in a large academic center contributing to research? Do you want to go into private practice moving forward? Those are the ideas that like you should think about and have a plan. And if you don't know, that's totally fine. And you can say, for now, I'm just really appreciative of this opportunity to be interviewing here, to match into XYZ field. And I'm hoping, this will be a great opportunity for me to explore exactly where I want to be. That's totally fine to say as well. Hope that helps.
Question 9, why did you choose to become a medical practitioner? So I think kind of similar to question 5, again, just kind of highlighting why you're choosing the particular specialty you're choosing, and kind of going back to question 8 and seeing kind of your trajectory. I think that's important. The residencies, while they don't expect you to know exactly where you're going to be in 5 years, like Andjela said, it's important to have an idea of where you want to be, because residencies want people who are driven and who have somewhat of a plan.
And then last one, do you have any questions? I would prep like a question for faculty or residents, and some of the good questions are basically, why did you choose to be at this program? I think it's great. And they'll probably say something like, these are our strengths, or people are so amazing here, da, da, da. It's okay to ask, what is one thing you'd change about this program? I think that's a very fair question as well. You can, if you have a specific question about a faculty, they're doing a specific area or research, and you are just dying to ask them that question, and it shows that you prepared and you know who they are. I think that's also a great question. Sometimes, though, what I ran into during my interviews is like, you have 10 or 20 seconds left, and they're going to say, what questions do you have? And you're just, you're going to ask that question, and then you're going to get cut off, or it's just that awkward silence of like, well, it's about to run now, the time is running out, da, 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 anything else? So you're just like kind of waiting for the time to pass. If that happens, I think, you could say, I'm sure, we can maybe chat another time. I see that the time is running out. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate this opportunity, and I'd be more than thrilled to be in this program. So thank you so much. I think closing and saying that you're grateful for being there. If this is your number one program, and we can talk more about this, is you absolutely can say, this is my number one program. I want you to know that, but you should say that only if that's your number one program, and not to every program, because word gets around. The other way of saying that you'd be thrilled to be there is saying, I'd be thrilled to be there. That's not a lie, because we all, at the end of the day, want to match, and you're not using the word first. You're like, my number one. And then the other way is to you just like last 20 seconds sell yourself and say, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think I'd be great fit because of I am this, and this is shown that I would be bringing that to your program, and I thank you so much. And close that, and maybe you didn't get to ask a question, but I think you circle back and finish strong, and I think that leaves a pretty good kind of a print on that person. But yeah, and we can chat what more of the questions you can ask. Definitely different types of questions for faculty and residents. For residents, you can more ask, where do they live? How do they get to work? What's the transportation like? What's the cost of living? What is the one thing you guys would change? Like, do residents get along? What do you do for fun? Stuff like that. But yeah, I think we kind of really extensively discussed this slide.
No, you guys are awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for that in-depth analysis. Question though, is there such thing as a bad question to ask when you're in this position?
I think, you definitely don't want to ask a question that is easily searchable on their website. You want to ask a question that really shows, that you have insight into the program, you have insight into their strengths. So you definitely don't want to ask like softball questions. So that would be the only thing I would say when asking the questions. Make sure to prepare questions ahead of time, so you do have something to ask.
For sure.
I agree with Michael. That's a great question. I don't know how you feel about this. I never felt comfortable. Technically you should, but I never felt comfortable asking about like vacation days and benefits, not specifically off faculty. That's something that should be kind of generally the same across the board. Or, what's my call schedule like, or like, what's my weekends like? I think maybe you can ask that when you talk to residents, or you'll meet some residents you're very close with, and kind of from here say, here what the call schedule is like, and what's the, what's your holiday schedule or maybe vacation look like. But I never really was comfortable asking faculty that, because you're the eager resident who's going to be there and work no matter what, and that's kind of the culture we have. I don't know if that's the healthiest culture we have, but it's just, it is what it is at this point. I don't know what you think, Michael.
I agree. It'd probably be better to ask those questions to the residents, during like the social hour the night before, the meeting with the residents. And more often than not, the faculty may not have any idea about the call schedule anyway.
That's true.
So I would, I would ask program specific questions about like schedules and things like that to the residents.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, this question, I guess we'll go into asking the best responses for these questions.
Why did you want to become a doctor? So I think number one, so if you think about this question, you want to answer not only why did you want to become a doctor, but also why that particular specialty. And a lot of people are going to have similar answers to this. So you want to make sure that you can highlight your strengths and kind of your own journey through medicine. Although people have similar reasons for wanting to go into medicine, everyone's going to have a different journey. So I wouldn't be, disheartened by the fact that everyone is going to say mostly the same things. Everyone wants to help people. They like science. They like, to talk to patients. But just kind of look back at your entire application, find the common thread that kind of links all your activities together, all your research experiences together, and kind of, weave a story, and a compelling story, hopefully, about your journey and how that led you to, where you are at that moment interviewing for your program. Let's see, personal encounter. And yeah, I think telling a story, with the biggest advice that they give for like writing essays is show, don't tell. I think this also can be applicable to these interview questions, is telling a short story about something that impacted you, and then kind of tying that into your experiences and what how that helped you decide to apply for your specialty.
I agree. Yeah. Describe your working style with patients. This is a tough one. I don't even know if I had this one specifically, like working style with patients. I think I've had it with, obviously like, colleagues, friends, and stuff like that. But so outline your approaches to communicating treatments, offering medical guidance to patients. Um, Additionally, specific experience, in your style, illustrate its positive impact. Got it. Okay. I mean, I think it's just kind of drawing on your specific experiences when you were either like shadowing or you were a third year or fourth year medical student, and taking that responsibility, or kind of growing as a medical student and almost being an intern or a sub-I, um, and showing what you did to have an impact on their care, and how did you do that. And the most classic things that come up is your residents, or the residents you worked with are going to be very, very busy, and so you stepping in and taking that extra mile to go back and actually explain to the patient that you notice they maybe didn't understand, whether that was how to take the medicine, or how they can go pick it up. And at the end of the visit, they really, really appreciated the extra time you took, and you actually got to find out that they're from the same town as you. I mean, not like making things up as we go, but I think that memorable patient encounter that you have that shows that you actually, saw that maybe we were too busy that morning in rounds, we didn't get to talk to them, but then you volunteered and said, listen, like, I'll go back and talk to that patient before they get discharged, and I'll make sure they actually have all the instructions, and they feel like they're okay with everything before going to the hospital. And that just shows, listening skills, kind of being aware of your surroundings, and volunteering and taking initiative to help out your team. And I'm sure each one of us has done that and has had that experience, when then in turn you had a really good time with that patient, and that patient really stuck with you. And so that's how I would go about this, is usually, again, show an example and be as specific as possible. It takes maybe a little bit of digging, but I think having these examples on hand, like a couple of these, becomes really much easier when you're in an interview in a nerve-wracking situation, and they maybe throw like a question you didn't expect, but then you prepped, and you can kind of use that answer you prepared in a slightly different way. Hope that makes sense.
What skills do you believe are necessary to become an excellent medical practitioner? So I think, like the last question, it's important, like Andjela said, it's important to have a few patient stories, patient interactions that stuck out to you throughout your medical school experience. Having, I would say, maybe 2 or 3 different interactions, whether they be good, bad, where it taught you a lesson, where you went above and beyond for a patient, and having kind of not a script per se, but an outline of the story, and being able to adapt those stories to these different questions. So for example, in this case, you can kind of adapt, the situation that Andjela took, or explain where you went above and beyond. So then you can say, as a medical practitioner, you aim to go above and beyond for your patients, and this is an example of when I went above and beyond. So I think, to answer these behavioral type or situational type questions, you should have some stories like prepped, or patient interactions that stuck out to you prepped, so that you can kind of adjust them according to the question you're being asked. Okay.
Why did you apply for this residency program? You will research the program you're interviewing at the day before, maybe even a little bit before. If you guys have friends who went to that program, or are at the program, or any other way you can find out. I know there's an infamous spreadsheet out there that has all the information about all the programs, and I don't know if I would use it for a barometer, whether you got interviews and when you got interviews. It gets really stressful. But I think one thing that spreadsheet, and if you don't know what it is, ask us and we'll go over it. But the one thing that it provides is information on some of these programs. And so I would definitely, read upon whatever they have on the website. And if you do have friends, try to reach out to them and see what they think, is the strength. And I would obviously focus mostly on the strengths and the positives rather than whatever they said maybe is a negative. Every program is going to be a combination of pros and cons. So focus on the positives and try to kind of highlight the fact that you've researched those. Some things that generally come up, if you're going to a large academic center, is usually the breadth of pathophysiology that they usually see and the patient population that they have. Certain hospitals are safety net hospitals, meaning that they have patients come in who don't have insurance, and that usually means a lot of diverse patients, right, who have just moved to the area, and they're kind of we're their first contact. So, and that's it's such a privilege to take care of patients from kind of all across the world. So I think if that program has something like that, it's really important to bring it up. Again, if it's a larger program, then I'm sure they're very good at in research. They may be good at a specific area, so like rheumatology or GI or cardiology, and you may be interested in that particular field. So I think that's important. Maybe they have a really high board passing rate, and those are some of the things that you can look up in Doximity and some of the other websites. So that's something that may be important to you. If you're interested in a fellowship and they have a really high matching rate in fellowship, I think that's something to bring up as well. And then ultimately, if these are not big programs, you'll get a good training pretty much anywhere because it's kind of in your control, for the most part. And if it's a smaller program, then you can emphasize that part and you can say, I actually wanted to be in a smaller program and have more attention and more time spent with faculty, one-on-one, as opposed to being in a large program, and build relationships with my co-residents, in a smaller class. And you can basically spin anything into a positive. I would just make sure that what the program size is, what their strengths are, and then you can just go from there.
Do you like research? So I think nowadays, no matter what program you apply to, they'll expect some sort of research experience. So I know a lot of people don't really like research, but that's just the reality of, applying for residency nowadays. There's always usually a research component, at least doing some sort of research project. So I think it's important to, don't say that you hate research, because unless that program does not have a research component, that would not be good. But you want to show that you're open to doing research, you're flexible, and obviously, if you really are interested in research, that's a plus. But I think the programs just want to know that you're open to like the process of like scientific inquiry, and you're open to being exposed to how to start a project and kind of take it from the IRB to publishing something. Obviously, if you've had research experience in medical school, that'll be even better because then you can talk about your experiences during medical school. But you just want to show that you're open to research, and that it's something that you would be able to do in the future. Even if you're not interested in academics in the future, I think the reality is that you have to do research nowadays to get into residency.
Okay, so now we'll touch base on how to actually prepare for residency interviews.
So we talked a little bit about this, research the program. I think some of the websites are better than others, but just do, your diligence and just look at the website a day or two before, see what really their mission is. There are a couple of other things like we mentioned, Doximity, that you can look them up on and see, are they maybe highly ranked in research, and if that's something that they pride in, or how are their board scores and stuff like that. So I think those are some of the metrics that you can look up. And then again, if you do have friends or people who went from your med school, went to that program, you can reach out to. I think that's also a pretty good insight. So that would be number one. Just kind of know where you're interviewing.
And then we kind of talked about the common interview questions. I think overall, besides, I think having like an outline for tell me about yourself, why this particular specialty, you should have some patient stories kind of rehearsed or saved inside your mind that you can use for those behavioral type questions or those situational type questions. Um, and I think, this slide has a lot of those common interview questions that you should at least have an outline for how to answer. You don't want to be answering the interview questions the first time when you're in the interview. So that would, try to avoid that for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's fine to be awkward with whoever you're practicing with, and even with yourself in front of the mirror and repeating a lot of times, because that will actually pay off and you'll feel more comfortable when you're actually speaking to that person. Review your application. This is a big one, actually, because we think that we know ourselves and we put that application together, but then, there's a lot of you guys are all very successful out there and your CVs are glowing, I'm sure. But that requires you going back and, just knowing everything you put on. I think it's a little bit easier this year that I think they have like 10 experiences for you guys. We used to buff that resume up. It's like million pages. But now it's a little bit more standardized, but still that even more so means that you should, if you put something on that resume, you should know about it. And, you should have a brief summary and talk about it within a minute and a half. If they have more questions, you can answer. Specifically for research too. So if there is something that you published and you put it on there, or it's submitted and you put it on there, expect them to ask a question. If they don't, great, but expect it. I remember, and I'm sure Michael too, you can talk about this too, but I remember specifically an interview for a prelim at a program where preliminary internal medicine where I interviewed. They literally pulled up my CV and it was just like question 1 about this, question 2 about this, question 3 about, they literally just talked about my resume. It wasn't very conversational. They just wanted to talk more about whatever I put on there. And then somewhere, they're not going to, read your research paper and ask you that one signaling molecule that you published on, but they will ask you oh, this is really interesting. I actually research the same topic. Can you tell me more about this paper? What did you guys find? And so you should be able to summarize it in, a minute and a half. And if they have follow-up questions, hopefully you remember. If there was a case report and you can't remember if the patient was 51 or 52 years old, that's fine. But generally, what happened to the patient, what you guys do, and what else you found. So just know your application. I know it sounds very simple, but make sure you review stuff that's on there.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, there are some attendings or faculty who will ask you, they may ask you an insightful question. So just make sure that you do know what you published and things like that. So mock interviews, I think, it's pretty important. At least do one mock interview before, you start interviews for real. That just kind of helps you kind of put yourself in that interview mindset and kind of get the nerves out, I think. And it'll also help if you kind of get a third person perspective of how you come off. So you come off like the best that you can. So getting at least 1 or 2 mock interviews before you start the interviews for real, I think, is crucial for the residency interviews.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Stay informed about healthcare trends. Oh boy. So this was more for medical school for me, but maybe I just didn't do enough prep. So I think, some of the questions they may ask these days. So when I was prepping for med school, it was basically what do you think about our healthcare system? And you just want to stay neutral, right, on this topic, because there's always 2 ways. We can talk about how, we have issues because our healthcare system is very expensive. However, a lot more patients here are able to get some really, really high technology surgeries and care as opposed to some other countries. Or, on the other hand, there's universal coverage in other countries, but, some of the patients there may be waiting on the most basic, simple transplant for 6 to 8 months. And those, some of the things there were, active back in the day, but the most important thing is that talk about both sides and how you can see that both things are, pretty, can be very challenging and problematic, but it's just such a fine balance of finding that perfect system. And then I think nowadays AI or artificial intelligence is something that's coming up, and especially in radiology, those of you interviewing radiology or some other specialties that maybe a little bit more influenced by that. Derm too. I mean, they're saying that the pictures are going to replace us. So we'll see. But I think it's most important to know, I doubt it, but it's most important to know that that's something up and coming. And if they ask about what do you think, how this is going to affect the healthcare, that you kind of present both sides very neutrally, and just say that you can see, the positives of AI and how it can really, really help the field, but also how, you really still need that personalized touch from a physician guiding you through treatment and communication. So that's something that came up to me just now. Maybe Michael can help me if I missed anything of the healthcare trends nowadays.
Yeah, no, I think, you kind of touched it on the nose. AI is definitely, if you're going to be asked about any healthcare trends, I think it'll be AI this cycle and probably the next cycle too. But
maybe telehealth.
Yeah,
I don't know. Telehealth, maybe. If that's something, yeah.
Yeah, fortunately, I wasn't asked much about this during my residency.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah,
so mostly, I think this has been not that common. Sorry to interrupt you.
And then prepared questions for the interviewers. We kind of touched on this. Ask the appropriate questions to the appropriate people. Ask questions that show that you did your research, and ask questions that show that you're interested in the program. I think that's the best way to do that.
Dress professionally. Yeah, just pretty standard. Your professional dress code. I think for gentlemen, for guys, it's usually a suit. Michael, you can comment on this. I think for ladies, basically, stay with just like neutral colors. I think it's like black, brown, beige, but I think this is a pretty standard. I think I also wore like a blazer and just a dress shirt underneath. Just nothing that would completely stand out. Something you'd wear to a business meeting. Same for medical school. And then I think background is something we discuss these days for virtual interviews. Some people have like a pretty plain virtual background. I think that's totally fine. I wouldn't rep your institution. I would, again, stay neutral. And then if you I didn't have a virtual background, and right now I don't like what I have in the background. So I would find something more like Michael has. So like just one color, and pretty simple. So the focus is on you and not so much on what's in the back. When I interviewed for residency, I was in Miami, and the background was like a beautiful, beach and ocean. And I just pulled the curtain because people would probably be like, why would you ever leave? And so like I just hid it. I was in a very dark room with plain background. I think you just want the attention on you. Some people would disagree with me and maybe say like have a plant in the back and have a little bit of life, but I just decided to be low risk.
I agree. I think neutral background, and make sure to pick a place that's not too dark. You definitely don't want to have like a shadow on your face, because that could, being on the other side, interacting with applicants, if you can't see their face right, if the lighting is not ideal. So, be mindful of where you are in the lighting. Nowadays, that's something that we have to consider with these Zoom interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And then rest and self-care, I feel like this is pretty self-explanatory. I think the night before one of my interviews, in the morning of my interview, I don't usually drink coffee, but I decided to drink like 3 cups of coffee that morning, and I was like jittery the whole day. So, just be mindful of, caffeine and how it affects you, and just take care of yourself.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, you guys. So we've reached the question and answer. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask our panelists, just go ahead and pop it in the chat box and we'll go ahead and answer that for you guys.
Don't be shy.
Is there anything throughout your experience that was really memorable for the interview? Like something that really stuck out with you that you never thought that experienced before, or?
Michael?
I think,
Sorry, I you on the spot.
Yeah. Let's see, interview experience. Well, there was one time that I was kind of caught off guard by like a behavioral type interview, because for most of the interview day, they were pretty informal. And I think most interviews are pretty informal, conversational, and casual. And then one interview was just, behavioral or situational question after situational question. So that's kind of like, a negative. But like I said, it's important to have those patient stories that you could always look back to or pull out of your back pocket to adapt to those situational questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, Angela, looks like you got that question, but Zara asks, what are CVs? CVs are the same thing as resumes, just so we're clear. But yeah, any more, guys? Keep them coming.
I think while we're waiting, I'll just say, tell me about yourself is a pretty important question. Pretty much any interview will be open with that, and that's something you have. You're welcome, Zara, of course. You'll have you have an opportunity to open up the interview strong by practicing, and I think we didn't cover that today, but I just keep them. You can probably talk about yourself for ages, and so I would just keep it brief. So a minute to a minute and a half is kind of like a rule that I've heard is pretty good, because it sounds like you're not rambling, but it's enough time for you to say the most important things. Generally I would kind of talk about a little bit about, where you're from, and maybe something that's not just about medicine, but ultimately this is a job interview. So I would open it up with something of, how you got into the specialty you're interviewing for, and then just close up by thanking for this opportunity, and then moving, and then, saying that you can go into anything else in more detail moving forward. But keep it brief, and keep it professional, and then maybe a little bit more fun with something personal in there. I think
we have a question from Zara. Did you go to multiple interviews? If you aren't accepted into the hospital you're initially interested in, with another hospital, ask about it. So I just want to clarify, is this more about maybe not matching the first round, or not matching one year and then matching again? Because I think, so if it's in that situation, I think once you are labeled as a reapplicant, that will make it harder to kind of get in the second time around, especially to places that you did not match at initially. That's not to say that it's impossible, but it does make it more difficult to match the second time around once you're a reapplicant at those places that you initially did not match to, I think. But I don't think they'll necessarily ask. I don't think, they're not, or faculty or not. I think it's an illegal question to ask, where have you interviewed so far, or, those types of questions they're not supposed to ask, and they're technically ACGME violations if you are asked about those types of things.
actually
hopefully that
okay to
answers
say
it.
you're not comfortable answering the question. It's totally
Hmm.
fine. You can just
Yeah.
say, I'm not really comfortable answering that. Or if they ask you, I definitely had a person ask me, if you don't come here, where are you thinking you're going to go? Or like, where else are you looking into going? And I just said Northeast, and that was very, vague and broad, but that's as comfortable I wanted to make it.
Yeah, yeah, but keep it broad. If they ask about those things, keep it just like a geographic area. But yeah, definitely agree with Angela. If there's a question that feels kind of like, oh, they shouldn't be asking me this, there's a reason why you're feeling that. So definitely go with your gut and just tell them you're not comfortable answering that question.
So true. All right. I think if there are no more questions, we're good to call it there. I want to thank everybody for joining, and thank you so much to our panelists for having and guiding a really awesome, insightful conversation. I hope we all learned a lot. I know I did. Just want to clarify again that this deck will be sent out, and the link to the presentation will also be sent out to your email addresses tomorrow if you missed anything or want to go back and review. But after that, that's it from us. Thanks so much for joining. Take care, everyone.
Good luck.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.